Welcome back to the New Indian Express's ThinkEdu Conclave 2021. As we step into a new normal, we talk about the lessons we need for this new world. We have a day full of intriguing and thought-provoking conversations planned for you, so sit back and enjoy. Our next speaker is working on a project which maps the human mind. And what's better, it is an Atmanirbhar project. Please welcome Infosys co-founder and chairman of Auxiliary Ventures, Chris Gopalakrishnan. Senior journalist Kaveri Bamzai will also join the conversation.
Hello and welcome to yet another session at the ThinkEdu Conclave. I have with me Chris Gopalakrishnan, who is not only one of the co-founders of Infosys, but also one of the leading lights of research on the human brain. He's in fact donated money for 3 chairs at the IIT Madras, if I'm not mistaken, and of course the Brain Research Center at the Indian Institute of Science, which he initiated and sort of created in 2017. So it's been about 4 years since that center came up. And the focus, if I'm not mistaken, was on aging and to understand how the human brain ages. So what have the learnings been so far? And of course, then we'll talk about artificial intelligence, because that's really something that the world seems to be quite concerned about, and rightfully so. So what are the learnings that you've had so far in all the research that's been done?
So first of all, Kaveri, thank you very much. Thanks to the New Indian Express group for inviting me for this very interesting session and topic, a topic that's very dear to me.
Yes.
The Center for Brain Research is established around 2015. So it's now about actually 6 years.
Okay.
Since the center was established. It took a little bit time to understand, what or come up with what needs to be done. And the 2 major programs that the center is involved. One is longitudinal study of 10,000 people over 10 years. These are people in Srinivasapura village in Kolar district, and people around 45, 50 years of age, and to see how they age. And so we are collecting their health parameters, their brain and cognition parameters. We are taking MRI data. We are also taking their DNA sequencing data, and to see how they age over the 10-year period. And if they develop some, let's say, disorder, then we go back and study the data to see whether we could have detected it early, right. Were there some early biomarkers. This data is probably the first data set that we will have of Indian subjects over a 10-year period, looking at their brain function and things like that. So it's in that sense, very, very important data. We are in the, this whole thing kicked off in 2017, as you rightly said, this longitudinal study. And so we are in the early stages of starting to get enough data to look at any trends, etc. There is also an urban cohort. So this is the rural cohort, which is being also tracked. And one thing, which came out, these are, of course, early observations, was that it was felt that stress levels in rural areas would be lower, and hence strokes would be lower. But to our surprise, we found that stress levels are same or similar in urban cohort and rural cohort, and incidence of stroke seems to be similar. So anyway, these data points will have to be analyzed, but these are the kind of inferences that we can now start making from the data that we are collecting. Of course, the cognition and the brain function will also be studied in detail. The second program or the project the center is doing is mapping 20,000 DNA sequences of Indian subjects, or mapping DNA sequences of 20,000 Indian subjects. This is a Department of Biotechnology sponsored project, of which Center for Brain Research is one of the participants. And the reason for kicking this off is that, again, when you need to look at genetic data, understanding Indian subjects. We need large databases, and we found that no laboratory in India had such large databases. At most they would have 500 or 1,000.
Right.
So let us collect all these labs together, create a central repository, and that's the genesis of this project. This will also be used to probably create a chip which can accelerate and reduce the cost for DNA sequencing of Indian subjects. So these are some of the plans for the Center for Brain Research.
Right. So there's quite a bit of concern about the kind of information, the kind of data that the big four, the GAFA as they're called, have about the world, and especially India. We're big users of whether it's WhatsApp or Facebook, perhaps their biggest market. So is there a concern? Is that valid? In fact, someone recently even went so far as to call us the biggest thought laboratory in the world for these four big companies, and how Facebook alone maps something like 6,000 parameters of every individual. So where are we headed in terms of these machines knowing us better than we know ourselves?
A very important question that we need to ask, we need to have an answer to or a strategy to.
Right.
Clearly, machines know more about us than we know ourselves, because machines collect, they organize this data, and then they can run algorithms on a particular individual's data, but also population level data. So you can compare one individual versus all other people, compare, let's say, Indians versus other ethnic communities,
right,
or male versus female. So population level studies can be done. And this data gives you so much information about the person and how to influence that person. So, unknowingly, we can be influenced to buy stuff that we don't need. Unknowingly, we can be influenced to, vote, in a particular way, or think in a particular way. It can influence us without us even realizing that we are getting influenced and things like that. And
what
that's
is called brain hacking these days.
Yeah, in some sense, so that's the the dangerous part of having so much data and things like that. And the business model that drives this, which is seemingly free services, right?
Yes.
Right. So they induce you to use these services and provide this data by saying that the service is free. You can connect with your friends, you can connect with your relatives, communicate with them. So we need to now think this through. I don't think it's unique to India. This is a problem now the entire world is facing, and and the concentration of this data with just few companies is where the challenge and the problems are. And the world is only just trying to figure out how to combat this. The concentration of power is huge.
Right. So just as Infosys was the leader in the IT revolution of the 90s, and then of course in the 2000s it really took off, is there no one out there, because you deal with so many young startups as well, is there no one out there, is there no idea out there that can become the next big Facebook, but for India, and where we can sort of compete with these four big companies, but on our own terms? And what would these terms be? There is also the concern that this artificial intelligence, because it's based on Western models, is perhaps skewed towards what is called Western values. Is that something that's also a concern? And can we in India create our own Facebook, our own Googles, our own really big behemoths which collect data, if data is the new oil, which it is?
So there are so many questions in what
I know, sorry.
you have asked. First of all, the information technology industry itself is very, very varied.
Yeah.
You have the hardware providers,
Right.
you have the software like operating systems, you have the horizontal applications like the search application or the social networking application. You have vertical applications like the ERPs that run the banks or run the retail industry, etc. And then you have the services companies. Now, what India has done very well is in the services industry, we are the world leaders. If you look at the top 10 companies in the world, 5 are Indian. There's still 5 are still Indian. In the vertical application,
which is the topmost company in the services sector globally, sir?
Depending on the market cap on a particular day, it could be Tara Consulting Services.
Okay.
Right. Right at the top, there are 1 or 2. Accenture is there, TCS is there. So, that's an area we are dominating, and I believe that we will continue to dominate because we have a base today. We have a professional base which understands how multinationals work and how global companies work, and we have the services ethos in India, the culture in India. The second part is the vertical industry, and we are starting to actually create products here which are going to be global products. In the banking services industry, today the top 2 or 3 products are actually of Indian or Indian origin, from TCS, from Infosys. If you look at even the Oracle product, genesis of that is actually, from India, and they acquired that company there. Where we don't have, and then the e-commerce application, for example, right, in the payment applications. So in vertical applications, in SaaS, etc., Indian companies are starting to dominate and create unicorns. We believe that the number of unicorns will become 100 pretty soon. This year, we are looking at 50. And when it comes to that size, you will have significant companies coming out of India. Where it's going to be challenging for us is to create these horizontal platforms like iOS or Android or Windows. There are only 3 in the world. Then these horizontals like a search engine or a Facebook or something like that, a social media network or a Twitter and things like that. That's going to be challenging because we need to come out with a new paradigm, and then we need to have the marketing muscle, the investment dollars to make that into a global entity. I'm not saying it will not happen, but that's a little bit more difficult for us to do.
Among the unicorns, among the young people that you mentor at Axelor and you invest in looking at their potential, do you see anyone who's interested in this area and is headed towards bigger things?
Well, Geo is supposedly coming out with its own devices, its own operating system, its own social media solutions, etc. So hopefully, we may have somebody from India sort of dominating at least one market, which is the Indian market, which is 20% of the global market.
Right.
The other area where I'm actually quite optimistic is gaming.
Right.
And esports and things like that. I expect, again, because we are large consumers,
yeah,
expect some big names to emerge out of India. If you look at the top 2 cricket e-games, etc., again, these are companies from India, Nazara, Jet Synthesis. So, it is possible that we will have some global companies coming out of India in some of these new areas.
So what are the things that we can do at an individual, at a corporate and at governmental levels? Again, 3 questions, I'm sorry. To sort of retrain our brains to adapt to this new world. Yuval Noah Harari has often talked about the whole idea of knowing ourselves. We also now have to know ourselves better so that we can compete with the machine which knows us so well. what can we do to at these three levels to do this better, to play this game, this global game better?
First and foremost, we need to have sufficient capacity and capability in this new area of AI, machine learning, knowing that technology, how to use that technology, contributing to the development of that new algorithms, etc. That's the first aspect. And the hardware infrastructure necessary to run these run these algorithms, because they require really high performance supercomputing infrastructure and things like that. So that's the first aspect of it, and we are starting to invest in that. We are as a nation talking about the need to create capacity and capability in AI, including research, so that we can come out with new algorithms and things like that. The second part of this is data, right? Data, we definitely generate huge amount of data, but who owns that data? I believe the ownership is clearly ours, because the data belongs to us, but it is not stored by Indian entities. It is actually collected and stored by entities outside the country, and we need to figure out how this data is available for our researchers, our startups to play around with and come up with new solutions and things like that. The government is looking at policy around data, looking at localization requirements. So even if it's collected by a foreign entity, it's made available locally. Government is, our own committee has recommended that, the non-personal data committee has recommended that this data must be available for research as well as for innovation, should be shared for innovation, etc. And the third aspect is both capital and human resources. So we need to train enough number of people in these new areas, create an excitement in getting into these areas, and the capital required to invest. See, sometimes we forget that the capital is anyway coming, so why do we worry? But what happens is, if that capital is foreign capital, these entities, these unicorns, become actually foreign companies. Ownership becomes foreign. So domestic capital, Indian capital, must actually come forward to own these entities and invest in these companies and keep the ownership Indian. I believe so.
Are you hopeful of that, sir?
Well, I'm very, very optimistic and hopeful about these things, because see, we have seen significant changes, right, in India. Where did a Flipkart come? Of course, today it's owned by Walmart, but where did it come from, right? India only. We're talking about 100 unicorns, right? So I'm very optimistic about these things, but this is only the beginning, and we need to create a positive virtuous cycle. What I mean by this is, you create new knowledge, you create innovative companies, you make them, scale them up and become very large, create wealth, and that wealth then gets invested back into research, creating new companies, and you create a positive virtuous cycle. This is how the Silicon Valley works, the capitalism works, etc. We need to unleash that engine in India, and this can only be done as an ecosystem. So we started with the brain, right? Brain sciences, I believe, is the most exciting area today, or one of the most exciting areas today. The whole fourth industrial revolution is called the intelligence revolution, and it involves all these technologies. So we need to create a positive virtuous cycle in India today of research, innovation, entrepreneurship and startups, wealth creation, such that wealth creation gets invested back. We need to excite and motivate our youth to actually focus on some of these areas, ask these questions about, what are the advances in brain sciences, and how can we leverage these to solve new problems or solve problems in new ways, and then create this positive virtuous cycle.
Right. So linked to this is the new education policy that the government has come up with. Have you had a chance to look at it and see whether it is headed towards this direction?
It is, they're talking about, problem solving skills. They're talking about creativity. They're talking about multidisciplinary, studies and things like that. You can take different subjects and accumulate enough credits. They're talking about transferable credits. They're talking about, getting in and getting out of, the educational system at different points, etc. All these, I believe, are important changes that we want to bring about, so that you create the right skills, which is about problem solving, creativity, and things like that, research, and you also give the flexibility for students to take on things that interest them.
Right.
And with different options and things like that.
Right. Where are we to in the study of brain sciences at a lower level, at the level of undergraduate studies or postgraduate studies? Where are we at that level?
So this is a growing field in India. We don't
Right.
have enough capacity,
Right.
and we need to, we need to attract more people. We need to invest more in research. We need to grow this field in India, and the field is actually very, very vast.
Yeah.
All the way from the hardware, understanding the human brain as an organ, understanding, the for example, the neurological disorders, and we didn't talk about that, and that itself is a huge field. Then taking those understandings and applying that to the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution, the computer revolution and things like that, and then looking at the way in which brains can be influenced with the data that we collect, to understand human beings, and to understand then questions which are going to be, or we are going to try to address in the future, things like what is consciousness, what is intelligence, can we think about completely mimicking a human being, how do we prevent ourselves from getting influenced by machines, things like of that nature, and the ethical questions about do we allow the machine to take decisions with human life, where human lives are involved, etc.
Right.
These are very important questions, and we need, so this field is actually very, very vast.
Right. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, is there something in our own ancient texts that can also help us sort of look at some of these questions? After all, when we talk about consciousness and intelligence, these are things that a lot of our past greats have addressed through history and time. Is there something that we can use from there and actually make it valuable for contemporary times?
I believe so. We have a lot of practices. See, I see the difference between what we have in India and the knowledge that we have in India,
Right.
and the Western knowledge. The knowledge in India is based on from practice to the lab.
Right.
We have several practices, and now we need to understand why we do certain things and why it works. Right? Yoga, for example, or meditation, right? Why it works, now we need to understand. Whereas the Western world is, you actually, experiment in the lab and then bring it to practice. So lab to practice. So we have a lot of ancient knowledge. We know that many of those work, and I think, the beauty of yoga and meditation is that it allows us to control the mind. There is nothing in the Western science that allowed people to control the brain other than medicine. Whereas here, we train ourselves to control our brain. So there are things that we need to take from our ancient knowledge and modernize it and bring to the lab so that we can understand why it works. That's one aspect.
Right.
Now, the second aspect is the philosophical aspect.
Yeah.
See, Western civilization or Western knowledge systems are all about the individual being the paramount.
Right.
Right? Whereas in the Eastern philosophy, we think society comes first,
Right.
the group comes first, and the individual is subservient to the society. And
Right.
so peace, harmony are more important than sometimes individual freedom.
Right.
So, the understanding of both these, the differences, what is good about each of these, and marrying these two, I think will also be very, very important to think about the future. And a lot of the issues related to what we talked about, these companies having so much data about us and knowing a lot of things about us, they actually talk about individual freedom is very important. We say, no, the harmonious society is also equally important, or maybe sometimes more important.
Right.
And this, I think, these debates will have to continue.
Absolutely. But I mean, let's start those properly. I think that's what we need to do. We need to seriously engage and inform ourselves too. There's not enough information out there, do you think, among the leaders of corporate and political India and civil society? Is there enough information out there to engage in informed debate?
See, there is actually, it's just that not many people are engaged in this.
Right.
We are only starting to invest in research, right?
Right.
As businesses, as philanthropists, government has been investing in research, and government is a primary investor in research.
Right.
We need to now have industry and philanthropists invest in research, and I'm trying to encourage them to do that. And that's how the discussion and debate and knowledge systems are created. And we need to scale these up definitely in India, because these are very, very important questions for the future of not just India, but the future of the world.
Indeed, you have somebody like Jack Dorsey of Twitter who practices Vipassana, so he perhaps is using the best of our tradition to, inform his practices as well. It's interesting. And we ourselves perhaps have lost out on that somewhere. It's an interesting thing, no?
Yeah. So the interesting thing here is we still don't actually look at the science behind it. There are a lot of Vipassana practitioners in India.
Yeah.
But, we need to bring the scientific timbre and try to understand, what is the science behind it, why it works, etc., and demystify it.
Yeah.
We keep it as a mysterious thing still, and I feel.
Yeah, you're right. We still think of it as partly mumbo jumbo, that, but it has obviously tremendous benefits. And, we've seen that in so many people in so many cases. Can we talk a little about the neurological disorders, which we completely skipped? Could you tell us a little about what we are uncovering?
So, the opportunity here is to understand how as the brain ages, we lose some of our mental capacity.
Yes, that's true.
And understanding that is very important, because we are all going to live longer.
Yeah.
Right. If you look at the data, it shows that average longevity is increasing, and
right.
And it's also seen that because of our lifestyle, and this is the challenge, because of our lifestyle, people above the age of 65 develop, maybe 1 in 5, 20% of people develop some kind of disorder, dementia, etc. We probably write it off as aging related forgetfulness, etc. But some of those people may have actually medical conditions that need fixing, etc. So understanding these are very, very important. And again, we don't have good data. is the incidence of dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's same or lower or higher, right? We are increasingly seeing that lifestyle diseases like hypertension, diabetes are higher in India because, again, our sedentary lifestyle, food habits, etc. Now we need to fix them because they also trigger stroke and dementia and things like that. So, we need to understand this whole thing if you're going to live healthy longer, if you're going to reduce our disease burden. And then, we need to then figure out, can we actually find cures? And this will be a contribution to the entire world, because the entire world does not have a cure for Alzheimer's, for example, does not have a cure for Parkinson's disease. So this is something that we can provide to the rest of the world. Now, if the incidence is lower in India, and then we find out that it's because of our spices, or we use turmeric and things like that, and it's supposed to have some benefit to the blood and circulation, the brain, etc. If that is so, then this is something, again, we can contribute to the rest of the world. Another study that I'm supporting is the whole herb Brahmi. Right. Brahmi is supposed to help memory, improve memory and things like that. Again, we need a scientific study around these things and understand why, if it works, why it works, right? So these are the things that we can actually uniquely contribute to the rest of the world.
So there'll be many more turmeric lattes in America, I think.
Yes, exactly. People are lapping it up, and but the science behind it, if it works, why it works, should also be understood.
Right. As our brain ages, of course, we lose certain things. What do we gain as our brain ages? Because sometimes you become smarter, don't you?
So, see, there are two aspects. One is our ability to respond, our ability to remember. We slow down things, and that's part of aging. But that experience that we have and the ability to connect the dots and come out with, let's say, inferences, come out with the responses, is expected to become better as we age, as we get more experienced, etc. And again, the science behind it, we need to understand. And how can we train ourselves to do that? See, what is beautiful about the brain is that till the minute we die, it's actually constantly learning, it's constantly evolving. So can we train ourselves to learn new things as we age? Just like we can exercise our muscles, we can exercise our brain also. Train to learn new things, learn new languages, new capabilities and things like that. In fact, that's one of the ways people believe that we can keep ourselves mentally young, is to try to do new things, try to do things differently, and all of these things people can actually learn. If you have certain habits, change those habits deliberately, do things differently. It trains our brain to do certain things differently.
So youth is highly overrated.
See, today now, 60 is the new young, right? So, people are going to live, to 90, etc. And we should try and see how we can, prolong the period of being, contributors, good citizens. I think that's what we need to think about. And it also then opens up other things like, what is the retirement age? When should people stop working? I believe people should never stop working. They should continue to work till they die, right? So those are the things that we need to think about.
Sir, I wanted to ask you a personal question. What do you do to keep yourself mentally young? Because you're involved in so many things, you meet so many young people, you're investing in the brain. What are the things that you do as a daily practice, or as something that you've retrained your brain for, to keep yourself going?
First is physically fit. I think, you can be mentally fit only if you're physically fit, I believe. It's part of being meant. So I do exercises every day now. Morning exercise, and evening I try to go out for a walk.
What do you do, sir? Do you do yoga, or do you do,
It's a
do you go to
mix
the gym?
actually.
Okay.
No, I don't go to the gym. I do it at home. So I do some yoga, some aerobics, and
Right.
sometimes I do elliptical. So,
Okay.
so it's a combination of all these things. And the evening we just go out for a walk. It's a partly a relaxation also.
Right.
Go to
Right.
the park and walk and things there. And the second is, you need to interact with people. You need to learn new things. So I read for about an hour every day,
Right.
different subjects. Sometimes it's novels, sometimes it's you know uh, uh, some science subjects or history. So keep reading stuff and things like that, and interacting with people, because people interactions are very important. From a, you know you have knowledge, but how can you um, convey that knowledge so that somebody else can understand?
Yes.
It requires you to put that in a certain structure.
Hmm.
That itself, I believe, reorganizes your thinking, reorganizes your brain,
Right.
and then new insights may come out of that. And a lot of the things that I've now starting to understand better, I'm only starting to understand better, has happened in the last 5 6 years. Even computer science, now I understand better because of my trying to understand the brain, etc.
Right. What have you read recently which you really enjoyed and which you would really recommend to us? Because I know that you're very generous in your recommendations. You're always sharing what you've just read or just heard. And that's really wonderful because it gives the rest of the world, way forward. What have you just read which you really enjoyed?
So, I recommend Yuval Harari's books, The
Yeah.
Sapiens and
Right.
Homo Deus. That gives you a glimpse of what happened and what is
Right.
possibly going to happen.
Right.
That I recommend.
He
Uh,
also studies Vipassana. So interesting. He also practices Vipassana.
no, I find that more and more people who, um, you know, are thoughtful, think
Yeah.
about these things, are looking at meditation, etc., because they understand that's how you make the brain more active and more
Mhm.
powerful,
Right.
right? It allows you to, I think, restructure your thoughts and things like that.
Right.
Then I read stuff on genetics and gene and things like that. There are multiple books in these areas. I'm the third aspect I'm reading is about AI, machine learning. The latest, it's not a book, it's the massive report the US has come out with.
Okay.
Just released, it's about 750 pages. It's a
Oof.
government report on what US needs to do in uh, AI, machine learning, the fourth industrial revolution, the new
Right.
technologies that are emerging to retain their leadership position. It's a
Right.
fantastic document. I just started reading it, and I recommend you. I'm trying to think about how can I give you a pointer to that. Actually, it's about 750 pages. It's a national security committee that has been created,
Okay. Right.
and the report was just in February released.
Okay. So I'm sure if I look it up, I'll find it. So just one last question before going. We talk so much about the India-China rivalry. The real rivalry is also in AI. China is far ahead of us, isn't it? How did they manage to do that in the last 10 years and we sort of, lost the plot somewhere?
So they had a strategy around AI machine learning 10 years back. We are starting to build a strategy. So we are
Right.
kind of, behind in that. Even the US has admitted. And if you look
Yeah.
at this report is all about how US can regain that.
Right.
And the way you can regain is investing in research, investing in people, investing in entrepreneurship and startups, because these are the companies that create the products and the services,
Right.
and government working together with industry and academia to develop and execute this strategy. It can be done. I strongly believe that it can be done and it must be done. We're starting to do that. We need to um, be at it, and we need to take the time and the effort and the resources required to make that indeed happen. I am confident about our people, right? So what we now need is the systemic response and the resources that are required and the focus that's required.
Right.
Then we can do it.
Yeah. So is there any leader in this field, independent, attached to a university, whom you really track and whose ideas you look forward to in India or the West, in AI and the brain? Someone whom you follow?
Well, there are multiple people. When you look at the science and the machine learning, Jeffrey Hinton and people like that are the scientists behind that. Of course, most of these people are now either with Facebook or Google or Microsoft or Apple. They've recruited all these people. Then you look at reports such as this. There is a very good report which China produced 5 years back.
Right.
By 2030, they wanted to be dominating in the area of AI and machine learning. And they gave responsibility to industry. They gave responsibility to academia. They put money behind this. They attracted the best people from outside the country to come to China. So they did a lot of things, to make it happen. It just requires us to, I think we need to focus on this. See, just like we're focusing on space.
Yeah.
Right. And we are a leader in space, right? So just like that, I think we need to truly believe that this is going to transform, impact all our lives. And then we need to set specific goals and targets and put money behind it and make it happen.
Right. Is there anyone in India whom you would recommend one follows in this area, sir?
Professor Kamakodi at IIT Madras is one person who's knowledgeable, who's trying to work in these areas. But, it's not just an individual, right? We need that complete system behind him.
Like your center.
Yes. We need multiple of those centers. We need large researchers. We need large number of startups, and we need money.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Chris Gopalakrishnan, for informing us. I think it was a fascinating discussion. There's so much to learn about ourselves and about our brains, and it was a real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for talking about mapping the human brain.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you enjoy that session? We hope you did. You can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. If you want to check out the entire schedule and other sessions, log on to eventexpress.com, newinandexpress.com, or edxlive.com. Thank you for watching. Our next guest has brought a sea change in Indian cinema. She's made making women-centric films that actually told realistic stories of Indian women a trend. She debuted as a director in 2011, and her second film, Lipstick Under My Burqa, made her a household name. Her Amazon series, Made in Heaven, which dealt with complex relationships, earned her accolades as well. Please welcome director Alankrita Shrivastava to talk about her experience telling stories that matter. Senior journalist Kaveri Bamzai will join her in the conversation.
Alankrita, it's such a pleasure to have you with us, and it's been so wonderful to see your journey, to see you evolving with every movie and series that you do, and to create characters that are, could be one of us. And I think that is just so wonderful, especially for women. I think as I think everyone says, you cannot be what you cannot see. So representation of all kinds of women is so important, and I think you've been the flag bearer of that. So thank you very much. I think from all the women who consume entertainment, I think they really appreciate that, and from all the men too. I think they, in fact, I'd like to ask you. Perhaps that's a good beginning. How have men in general seen, perceived your work?
First of all, thank you so much for having me, and coming to your first question about how men perceive it. I think it's changing, to be
Yeah,
very honest. I mean, a lot of my friends who are men, and are very honest in their sort of critique and review of my work, they often have told me that they feel like, the men are not well rounded and there's too little of them. And I've always called them out on the fact that, it's so strange that for decades and decades, we've had stories where men have been the center of the universe, and no one has really questioned why women really are, existing as like small parts, and
yeah,
really appendages, and like trophies, or like arm candy, or like just in a very token kind of way. And when women are making stuff which has women at the forefront, the question is like, but why are the men like this? I think I also have taken that little bit of criticism in my stride. I do try to, I feel like I try to etch out the male characters a little more step by step. But the thing is that the stories that I deal with, I feel I am creating a very female universe.
yeah,
And, the stories are through the points of view of uh, the female characters. So then it's very difficult for me to give space to the independent journeys of those men then,
hmm,
because I feel like there's only that much space. And if I want to really dig deeper into what's going on with the women, then it's um, then the men really do exist only as they exist for those female characters, and we only see them like that. So I feel like there is often like a kind of a reaction that men have, because I think they don't want to see themselves like that. And I had very harsh reactions, even when lipstick had come out, when men feeling like, what is this? And also a lot of men feeling very moved by the end of it,
yeah,
starting with feeling like we don't want to see this kind of a story, but then at the end feeling like, oh my god, we've never thought about, a woman from this perspective, or thought so deeply about a woman's life. So I think now I feel people have started expecting uh, this kind of a world from my work. And I think they have become more open. I think a lot of men were much more open, I feel, to Dolly Kitty, in terms of like, I got a lot of very positive kind of responses from a lot of men, which I thought was interesting. Also, they did feel that the male characters, had a little more to them. So I do feel that it's a sort of a journey and a growth. I think even, we as artists, we also constantly kind of growing. But I do feel that even if people have a negative reaction, I feel as if it's going to make you think two extra thoughts about women and their place in society, then I think it's fine, or even if you feel overall like, I can't understand this story, but there are few moments that kind of move you. For me, that's enough. I feel like, something has kind of like, I've made someone think about, or something, or feel something. But yeah, but I mean, it's a given that there will be some people always who will be like, why are the men not getting enough space? But it's okay.
no, in fact, there's something very interesting that Pooja Bhatt was telling me the other day when I spoke to her about Bombay Begums. And she said the men in the series actually are pretty supportive. And, they are not the ones who sort of locked up the women. It's the women themselves who have to open the door for themselves. And she felt that the men actually were very good, Imad's character and Danish's character, of course, even Shahana's partner, Vivek. So all of them, she felt, were not the ones who were imprisoning the women. It was the women themselves who had to break free. So I thought that was also an interesting perspective.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true, because I feel like I think even in Dolly Kitty, I was working with that feeling that they have to, that there's a lot of internalized
Yeah.
patriarchy that
Yeah.
one has to overcome. And I think in Bombay Begums too, I think the fight really is not just against men actively stopping you, but actually what society has made you believe that this is how you should live, and also like the kind of conditioning and sort of societal circumstances. So I do feel like, we all as women, I think like we do have a lot of internalized patriarchy, and it is a kind of journey to sort of unlearn that, to also be able to free ourselves and to actually maximize our potential. Otherwise, we are so used to being so apologetic about our own existence that I think there's a big internal journey for us too.
Right. You yourself have undertaken that internal journey as well, Alankrita. Your work has also shown that, I would say. But do you feel that in your own work, that your work has helped you overcome maybe some biases that you yourself had, which you didn't realize?
I feel it's still a journey, because I still feel like there's a lot inside me that a lot of unlearning I still need to do. Uh, but definitely, I feel like, uh, like I do feel that maybe there has been like more of a feeling, like a feeling of being trapped, which I may have felt earlier, which maybe is now getting undone. But I still feel that, like I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, but that's my perception. I still feel like the way, you know men sometimes so confidently they own a space
Yeah.
and they own the world and they feel so entitled. I'm always shocked at that, because I feel I'm always so happy with crumbs.
I
I'm
know.
like, chalo, a little thing has worked out. I'm like,
Yeah.
yay. And so I feel like it's a journey, because we've not been, and I really feel it's not so much to do just with one's personal upbringing.
Hmm.
It's just like how society has kind of made it feel. So I feel like that sense of entitlement, and I don't mean entitlement in a negative sense, but just
Yeah.
that feeling that uh I too can have my place in the sun, and I
Right.
too can have, like, say, whether it's resources for a film or anything. I feel like I'm still at a very like stage of feeling happy for very small things, and then I have to tell myself, no, I should aim for like better
Yeah.
and more.
Exactly. So I think that's a journey, that imposter syndrome. That's a journey I think every woman undertakes. And I think especially successful women have that sense that, oh, why me? Why am I so successful? Do I deserve it? And there's always that guilt. But talk a little about, we've talked about diversity and we've talked a little about representation. Talk a little more about that representation, because it's not women from just a particular class. You're also able to show a diverse set of women, religion, class, a profession. And that is so empowering, because that again shows you that it is possible to live another way.
Yeah, I think I became more aware of it after my first feature film, Turning 30, which was very much centered on a woman, like, like a world which I was very familiar with and comfortable with, which felt closer to my own lived reality in terms of socio-economic strata. So I think the one thing I did want to do after turning 30 is to explore women from a different class. I think that was something, I don't think it was a conscious thought, but I think it was an instinctive thing that I wanted to do, because I know that for my first film, I think it was just very instinctive to just go with what was most familiar and most comfortable. That was a story that came to me very naturally. But I did then after that want to go into a different landscape in terms of women who don't have the same economic resources. I think for me now, I've been thinking a lot about that. And I do feel that a lot of choices we make are very different when you have that kind of economic strength and that sense of financial backing, um, vis-a-vis when you don't. So I did feel that I wanted to explore what being from a different class, and also that does it mean that, and which is not always the case, but sometimes if you're in a smaller town and you come from not so much financial privilege, then it's harder to break off a lot of uh, barriers that are being kind of put into your life. And yet I feel like women are very spunky and they always find ways. So I think I wanted to kind of get into that space that even if you are confined by economic circumstance and your class, you will still have dreams and desires and still have like a way of kind of breaking out. And I feel like I kind of continued that theme into Dolly Kitty, where the women, are how that financial independence kind of has an interplay with the kind of choices that you make, and then of course taking it out of the traditional family structure. I do feel caste is something that I'm kind of learning about more. I did I didn't go into caste, but I just placed in Dolly Kitty the characters, uh, just made them from a certain caste.
Yeah.
Not out of like, I didn't actually go into what is there, but just to, I kind of like, I feel like there's a lot of in terms of that needs to be explored, and I think I haven't yet gone there. And I feel like I'm still in the process of educating myself more to be able to reflect more diversity in terms of caste. But I think it's been nice. In a way, Bombay Begum's the kind of socioeconomic strata is similar to my first feature.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess it's interesting to explore women in from different kinds of walks of life. And I think particularly in Bombay Begums, I enjoyed having Lily there as a person to sort of reflect off, like she's come from a totally different world, and the choices they make as how she perceives them, and kind of have some kind of a sort of a contrast. But I think that there's so much to explore. I think it's really just the tip of
It's
the
just
iceberg.
endless. And also sexuality. I mean, that's another aspect that you've explored so well, and especially in Bombay Begum's, through Plobita's character. She's so confused, and a lot of us are like that. And especially she's a young woman, she's come from a smaller city. And I like the way that everyone sniggers when she says Indore. They say, "Oh, I am Indore," and she says, "No, Jindal Institute." But it's so interesting. There's so much of that class bias there, and also her sexuality. She's not quite sure whether she's a lesbian or heterosexual. So those characters as well are very important to reflect the kind of reality there is, isn't there?
Yeah, 100%. I just feel that this heteronormative
Yeah.
kind of world is very unreal, and it's not very reflective of society. Because I do feel like everyone is not heterosexual, everyone is not cisgender. So I think it's nice to have space for, people who are queer. And so I think like that kind of loosening up, I feel, is something that is very, very, important. And and I think having that kind of representation on screen is also very, very important, because I just feel that we can't keep representing a world which is, just painted in like that kind of monotone without reflecting the diversity of society actually. And I just feel like it's so interesting, and there are so many things to explore when one has a kind of an empathetic look. One can look at characters with empathy, and whether they're exploring their sexuality, whether they are heterosexual, and they kind of have suppressed themselves in some way, or it's like there's some kind of discovery, or if they are like queer. I just feel like it's interesting to see that journey, and for me that journey becomes very intrinsic to the journey of the character. So even in turning 30, I remember I did have like the coming out of this one girl, which was played by Tilotma, and so it was not a very deep exploration, it was kind of just there. So I do think that we have a long way to go, but I think it's nice to have, in our stories, to have worlds and like which reflect a little more than just like the straight jacketed kind of characters.
What is the kind of reaction that you got to Bombay Begums? I'm intrigued, especially of older women, because I think I've never seen a woman on screen, talking about menopause, which is a lived reality for so many women of a certain age. But who talks about it? Who shows it? Who shows hot flushes? I've never seen that. How have women reacted to it?
I think I've got a lot of love for the show from
Ah,
a lot of women around the world, in fact. So it's been quite interesting. But of course, also interestingly, a lot of women have, they're finding the show too uncomfortable also. There are some,
really? Yeah.
yeah, they're feeling like there's too much sex and sexuality, and why is there menstruation and menopause? And I guess like there's also this feeling of not being comfortable seeing that kind of lived reality being represented on screen. I did have this reaction even during Lipstick, where some people were really feeling like, why is
Bua's character, especially.
yeah, older woman, and why does she have to have the, you've just, so I feel like there is a bit of that, I have to be honest. Some women have, like some of my friends' moms, they're like, please send her my love, but please tell her there was just too much sex in the show. So there is a bit of that, but a lot of women actually who are older have actually messaged me and called me and sent me messages saying that they're feeling like, like it's really nice for them to see such full-bodied women and to really see the female experience in it's many kind of contours, rather than just seeing women in a particular way. I think what also happens is, I think we've become very used to like women beyond a particular age. Even if you see them either as this one like very powerful person, or like vindictive person, or like this sacrificing kind of person. So women beyond a certain age, definitely, I think like we've not seen so many well-rounded characters, and mostly they're quite asexual.
Yeah.
And I think even the ones who are feeling like that, I think the fact that they're thinking about it and like all of that is quite interesting. But but a lot of older women have really felt very, very comforted actually by seeing the show.
It's so interesting. You can't show two women who are too young, you can't show women who are too old. I mean, what do? You can't have, a straight jacket that you can only show a certain demographic. It's not possible as a writer. How do you do that?
Yeah, and I think this obsession, honestly, with women in their 20s, now a little bit it's gone into early 30s. Which is
just about,
Just about, yeah. It's very strange. I think I've never understood it, because also I feel like, characters at that stage, they haven't lived life enough.
Yeah.
And they've also grown up enough. So I just feel like it's a very strange kind of thing. But I think it's our obsession with seeing women as, our obsession with love stories and imagining the protagonist of the love story to always be this very beautiful virginal girl who's very pure, and when she'll marry, it will be forever and for good and all of that. So I think it kind of stems from that. And I think we really are a very ageist kind of society, and I think especially on screen, particularly with women, I think it's so strange that our male actors, they are continuing to work.
Oh yeah,
they still play college sweethearts and romantic heroes, and there's no problem, and they keep working with female actors who are decades and decades younger than them, and that's just to maintain their own screen age.
Exactly,
they want to keep looking younger. But like a female actor is so quickly written off, saying that, oh, now she's too old or whatever. But I'm glad things are changing, a little bit. I think in the last few years, it's definitely become a bit better.
Yeah, and as you said, our male actors are actually acting opposite, sometimes daughters of women actors that they worked in early on in their careers, or in some way or the other, or colleagues, daughters of their colleagues. It's so bizarre, but it's accepted.
Yeah, I find it very weird,
but it's quite creepy.
It's pretty strange, and I guess again it's a reflection of society, how like the man is ever young, like evergreen, and he's always considered attractive, and somehow like a woman post 35, so you can just forget it. Like, so I think it's very odd, and I think we really do need to start seeing more mature female characters, because I feel characters who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, they're more interesting for me, simply because I feel they've experienced much more in life, and I feel like the decisions they make will not be so black and white, because I feel like they've experienced life more, so they know that things are not one way or the other. It's like life is quite complicated, and what you think, at least personally what I feel, what you feel in your 20s, that sense of like, all of that pretty much goes by in the decades to come, because you see so many ups and downs, so many things happen in everyone's life that you don't react in the same way to those same things, and your lived reality has shaped you in a certain way, which makes you much more complex and layered. So I actually think it's very interesting to explore women who are supposedly past that kind of prime women.
Sexually active age.
Yeah.
As if there's a button that they can switch off.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
Neelima Azim's character, I think, in Dolly Kitty, her daughter is in fact the most judgmental of her. And that dynamic again was so interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Because I do think that, because I feel like the same point that we were talking about earlier, this internalized patriarchy that women kind of live with, you have to, like, something has to jolt you out of it. And I think we do judge our own, older women, whether it's sometimes our mums or our aunts or our grandmoms, uh, very, very harshly. And I think it is a reflection on us. So I do think that that journey does have to be taken, because sometimes you're like, oh, like what you might expect of your mother, and then you realize that you're also putting her in that kind of a box,
Exactly.
and not like letting her have that kind of space to be a woman, because you've so put her into that thing of that she must be like the best mother and the greatest mother. So I also feel like, for me, I think an examination of the idea of motherhood is very interesting, because I feel that is one of the ways that Indian society has used to kind of put women into that box. And it's like, once you're a mother, then basically you're no longer, like, you don't have like agency, or you shouldn't have desires, or all your decisions, you should be this perfect mother who puts motherhood before anything else. And I find that interesting to explore, because I don't think that women suddenly, just because, of course, they're responsible for their children, but it doesn't mean that the rest of their being somehow cease to exist.
Right. So, Alankrita, how do you maintain authenticity? Increasingly as one becomes successful, one also becomes distanced from reality, distanced from other experiences. How do you ensure authenticity? It's such a difficult thing, isn't it?
I think I might have to worry about it later. I don't feel like that. I feel I'm a very grounded person by nature, and so I guess honestly, I've never thought about it until right now that you're asking me this question, but it is an interesting question. I do feel that it can kind of happen, but I don't know. I guess there's no answer for it really, but I do feel like there's a sense of, I feel, to not become, I mean, I don't want to sound cheesy, but I do feel that there's something that, about not being arrogant and being a little humble, I think is important. That I just feel that what you said, that I think one shouldn't lose touch with life per se. I think that is very important. And I don't know really, but I guess, to continue to read a lot, to continue to have conversations with people.
Conversations with people, yeah.
I think that is very, very important. And I think to not take yourself too seriously, that I feel is really important, because, and that again, I don't want to sound like I'm this thing, but, I do feel that honestly, a lot of women filmmakers, they will continue to grow, because I feel they don't have that, that vibe, which honestly a lot of male filmmakers develop. They'll suddenly they are like, I'm God, and then have full, like a band of people around them who only
entourage,
this entourage and whatever they say. So at a party also, you'll find them, it's like, they're talking and then everyone else is listening. I feel I know a lot of women filmmakers, none of them is like that.
Yeah.
So I feel like maybe it just comes from our own experiences and we don't tend to become like that. But I think it's important to always listen, to have your ear to the ground and not take yourself too seriously. I just feel at the end of the day, we're all just, doing our bit, telling our stories and trying to make some work that makes some sense to us and hopefully to some other people. So I feel like to not take ourselves seriously. And also, I think for me personally, I'm very scared of not growing. And I think that is my biggest fear.
Right.
Because I feel like, like that for me would be the worst thing if I felt like either, like, how does one keep growing? And I think the only way is to constantly be in a space where you don't think you're perfect or you've arrived or everything is like okay, but to keep feeling, and also to every new thing, I think giving it that same kind of love and enthusiasm and labor, without thinking that now I know it all and now in this one I'll just crack it because I just know how to do it. But I think always to go to set or to your computer if you're writing, or to set if you're shooting, with that sense of like, I have to strive to do my best. I guess that's it. I don't know, don't know if there's any other formula.
How is it working with other women? Increasingly, you have, whether you're working with women producers or working with women writers, for instance, for Made in Heaven. I think all the writers are women, and so are the producers, Zoya and Rima. And at Netflix as well, you have women bosses. So do you feel comforted by that? Is that something that makes you feel empowered, or is that not a factor?
No, I think it's happened very naturally and organically. So it's not like I'm like, I want to only work with women, but it's just happened so organically. And it started by Ekta deciding to distribute lipstick when nobody was willing.
Nobody wanted to do it, right?
Nobody wanted to do it. And I knocked at every door. So I think
then you went to her and she watched it and decided to.
She watched it and then she decided to back it. Yeah.
What did she tell you when you?
I mean, first she watched it and she. I think first she had only kept aside half, like to watch half the film, because she felt like she probably is going to be some festival type film, which she won't like not necessarily be that interested in. But she saw it. Her team had already seen it.
Right.
And then she saw half of it, and then she saw so then the first time she only saw half of it, but she really enjoyed it. So she came back and saw I think I went back and showed her the second half. It was a conversation that went on because they had to figure out how can she actually release, like, how will the strategy work? And we hadn't got a censor certificate till then. So it was a kind of like a conversation that went on, but at least she really, I mean, her gut instinct was that she should back it. And she really kind of, followed up with that, even though she felt like, and she knew that I'd been going everywhere and, nothing had kind of worked out. So I think that happened very naturally, and she has a team of like amazing women who work with her, and I get along with them really well. Ruchika,
they're all women again.
They're all at Balaji. Yeah, so Ruchika is one of the producers who works there. She's fabulous, and she and I get along really well. And then Dolly Kitty happened, and it really happened so organically. They were like, let's do something together. I told them I have this story, and it just kind of worked out. And even with Zoya and Rima, I just they had read an early draft of Lipstick because it had gone to some lab, and I think Zoya had been asked to read all the scripts of the lab or whatever. So that's why they had called me. And we just got along really well. And it just, it was very instinctive that we just had a lot of fun writing. And then I ended up directing 2 of the episodes. And so, and I think, and even with Bombay Begums, my producers are actually the original producers are these women from Churn Entertainment in LA. Okay. And I was in LA, and then like I was hanging out with, like, my agent was making me meet some people, and I met somebody, and then I don't know, and then it just kind of happened that we ended up pitching, they wanted to do something with me. We ended up pitching the story of Bombay Begums, and they really liked it. And it was so interesting because they were women from a totally different culture, but they were so excited, and they made me develop it. And there were, again, women at Netflix who greenlit it. And so I don't know, it's happened honestly very organically. I haven't, said that I want to do this, but it really helps because I feel they understand the material. Yeah. And like, so if I say I want a largely women's team, they get it. There's no, like, I don't have to be like, why do I want it? They're like, yeah, I think it makes sense. It's from a female point of view. So I think it's about them understanding the story. I think that is something that is important. And I think that's been lovely. And of course, it's not like, all men who are producers are not.
Yeah.
It's not like that. I feel like it somehow just kind of happened. And I think, of course, at the basic level, you need to work with people where there's mutual respect and they understand what you're trying to sort of do.
Yeah. But how hard is it to put your foot down sometimes if you don't agree with, maybe your co-writer or co-creator? How do you do that? Pooja told me something very interesting. She said, the way you handle power, in fact, you told her as well that power doesn't have to scream, power is. So you just be, and that's it. You don't have to scream out loud all the time. So when you have to say that you don't like something or you want to put your foot down, how do you do it?
I'm actually quite honest and upfront. I don't mince my. Actually, I'm very non-diplomatic, so it doesn't help much. But I've always, I mean, I have gravitated towards working in spaces where it's fine. So, for instance, when we were writing season one, Zoya, Rima, and I, it was a very democratic space. If I felt something, I could say it. I wasn't like, oh no, they are much more senior to me and whatever. It wasn't like that. We were writing it together. And if I felt something, I would say it and we would argue. You have to hear the other person out as well. And I do feel there can be a lot of growth with that. So it's not like anyone is saying anything, it doesn't make sense. I think the important thing is to hear everything out and then evaluate it and then take like a step forward. So you have to develop that sense of respect and understanding, I think, with everybody who you work with, because I feel like eventually you need to feel that whoever you're working with, whether it's a producer, it's a co-writer, it's another director, it's your crew, that they are only going to do things which are for the betterment of the material. And I think if you can that it's coming from that space, I think it becomes very collaborative and quite easy. And I think that if one is listening to what the other person is saying and taking suggestions that work and not taking, so then of course when you also say something which they may not agree with, then it kind of works out. And I haven't ended up being at loggerheads, honestly, with anyone because I just feel like touch wood. But I feel like listening is also as important, and knowing that others also have a point of view, and respecting what the other person is saying, because they also have a stake in it.
How much is there self-censorship? There's a sense that you can do this but not any further, politically, socially. Is there a kind of boundary that you cannot cross?
Yeah, of course there is. I mean, in any case, I feel for Indian filmmakers like me, somebody who's grown up in India and grown up largely watching a lot of Indian films, definitely there's already a sense of self-censorship, because that there are certain things that one is conscious level of self-censorship and the other is subconscious, where you won't go there because you are operating in a particular society, in a particular culture, in a country with particular institutional mechanisms. So there is, of course, that sense of awareness, and that sense of, like many things, I think, like your mind doesn't go there only because that, okay, it's not, it's not going to kind of work out. But now I think with streaming and all that, there is a sense of like opening up. Like I could never have thought 10 years back that, I could work on something like Made in Heaven, because I would feel like it's never going to be, you can't tell that story because it'll never be passed.
Why? So, just because the lead protagonist is gay, or is there other stuff there?
No, because from that perspective, because the lead protagonist is gay and we are going into his sexual life, and I would think that, like if to do that in a film, I would have thought 100 times if I wanted to make a film like that. But having said that, I feel it's important to tell our stories, whatever they are. We just have to learn to become more subversive.
Yeah.
I think that's the only thing I've realized, because there's no kind of end to it. And I do feel eventually, like, I don't think humanity can do without stories. And I think we just have to keep becoming more and more ingenious in saying what we have to say. And that's it. Because I don't know, like, also right now is a weird time. Theaters are like, have to still get back fully.
Yeah.
Streaming, we don't know. Like, so I think it's also a strange kind of time. But I think a certain level of self-censorship has always been there. And now it's just about being a bit smarter.
Right. And I think, what's your advice when young women come to you saying that they want to be a writer or director?
I mean, I normally tell them that to not worry so much about whether they have the talent or not, because I honestly feel everyone is talented. Everyone has stories to tell. I only tell them that please ask yourself whether you have the emotional bandwidth to deal with the ups and downs that come with being, a writer, and particularly if you want to be a filmmaker. maybe slightly less with the writer in these kind of times because there's more opportunity. But like if you can deal with rejection and you can deal with waiting, you can deal with self-doubt. Though I definitely think things are much better now than they were when we were all assistant directors and trying to kind of make things happen, because there are many more opportunities now because of platforms like Netflix. But I think I always tell them that ask yourself if you have it in you to stick it out, like have that resilience to stick it out, because I feel it's really about that. It's like, do you have it in you to be able to just get up the next day no matter what has happened the previous day and just kind of continue. So I think that strength to continue is really the defining thing. I mean, that's all. And I feel like having some sense of conviction in what you're doing. I feel like it's hard to continue sometimes if you don't know why you want to tell that story. So I feel a little like that conviction is important, and I feel everything else, you can work on. And honestly, I don't, I mean, I feel like talent can be honed, your craft can improve, but it's very hard to stick it out. So I just feel like that's really important.
How important has your training as a filmmaker been to your journey? Did you have to unlearn everything once you became an AD and once you became a full-fledged filmmaker, or did it help that you had been trained in the process?
I think it's helpful. I mean, it's very helpful. Like I did my BA honors in journalism from Lady Shri Ram College. I think that helped me a lot because it trained me to, anyway, I was always reading a lot, but it just trained you to think critically.
Right.
So it was a really interesting course. And then I did my master's in mass communication from Jamia, which was also a very beautiful course. And I think that, I think it's not about what you learn technically, because, technology keeps changing and honestly, you can figure all that out. I think the education is helpful in terms of opening up your mind. For me, so I don't feel like necessarily you need a film education, but I feel like an education in the liberal arts overall can be quite helpful. I don't know, just being alive to, I guess, life outside. So I don't feel that education can go waste in any way. So I feel like my education at LSR and at Jamia, I think helped me more, because I feel like it helped me grow as a person. So I feel like my closest friends, they're all from my master's course in Jamia. And I think having that support system has been one of the most important things in my life, because, my closest friends, they're all doing similar things. They all live in Bombay. And I think the journey for me wouldn't have been the same if I didn't have that support group. So I do feel that, there are other ways. I think it's not like what you learn about how to use the camera so much, which I think you can pick up, but it's I think the other things that kind of, the books you've read, the plays you watched, the conversations you had, the films you've discussed. And I think that's, for me, what is more precious about that kind of an education.
Are there people from your class who are filmmakers as well, currently?
From my class, yes, there's Akshay Roy, who made this film called Meri Pyari Bindu.
Right.
There's Danish Aslam, who made Break Ke Baad. Then he just made this series called Flesh. There's Aparna Purohit, who heads Amazon. There's there are lots of people actually who are doing.
That's very interesting, huh?
Yeah, there's Sharat Kataria, who's 1 year senior, who's made Dam Laga Ke Haisha and Sui Dhaga. Then there are lots of people. There's Ravinder Randhawa, who's a writer who wrote Anarkali of Ara, and now I think he's writing Pippa. So there are lots of, there's Babita, who's a studio exec, I think at Abundantia. So there are a lot of people who are doing a lot of interesting.
So do you meet up and you discuss your work? Or
yeah, some of them are like my really close friends, like Akshay and Danish. They are like my closest friends from college. So of course we meet all the time and we discuss. I think we do discuss work, but I think it's just nice to have friends who understand what's going on in your life when you're really stressed about a shoot, or you're like, oh my God, my edit is just not happening. You don't have to explain what you mean. they just kind of get it. So I do feel, and I've always maintained, that it's really important to have a network of friends who are also doing the same thing. Like I feel like my friends Ruchi and Narayan, Anvita, and all, like, you know, it's really nice to have like a good support system in that sense.
When you see young ADs on your set now and you think back to yourself as a young AD with Prakash Jha beginning, you know, do you see a lot more confidence in the younger women today, or how do you see that?
You know, it's a mixed bag, to be honest, because I feel like the aiding system has changed a lot.
Okay.
So when I started out, honestly, all over the film industry, that organized Hollywood kind of aiding system was not in place.
Right.
So there was a lot of that traditional kind of aiding, which is more like Guru Shishya kind of aiding,
right.
you know, like you work with, which is how I was trained. I worked with Mr. Jha and I did everything. And it was like great learning, because I just learned how to become responsible for everything. There was no like, this is not my job or that is not my job. There was nothing. If something went wrong, it was on me. So it trains you in a very different way.
Right.
Whereas I think the aiding system now it's more clinical.
Right.
So people are just doing their specific kind of jobs. And I don't know. I mean, I guess that has its own plus points, because it's all very professional. There's a lot of paperwork. Everyone's like on top of it. They're all on their walkies and very like, you know, but I feel, for me, maybe I have that kind of nostalgia. I feel like that other system taught you more about the whole creative process. Whereas I feel the system now, I think these girls are much more, girls and boys actually, they're much more organized, they're much more like sharp and all of that. But somehow I feel like there's become a bit of a distance between the creative process and what they are doing. So if someone's in charge of getting actors, they're just doing that.
Yeah.
You know, they're at the van getting the actors, get the actor, like whatever, that kind of a thing. So it's become more like they have very, very specific functions. But there are DAs, which are director's assistants now, which is was not there earlier. Earlier, it was all kind of all in one. So I think they have it better, because like now my DAs, they work with me the whole time.
Okay.
So they actually know everything. They're in on all my meetings. They are there when I'm doing shot division, whatever I'm discussing with the DP, with the production designer. So they have a more holistic approach, and they also have to take care of things like coffee and all. But basically, you know, and my schedule and all of that. But at least I feel like they're much more exposed to the entirety of the process. So I guess it's different now, but I think there's more opportunity for this generation now to start off much more quickly. They don't need to, I think, assist for so long if they're assisting to actually become directors, because they can actually make short films, put them up out there. And, you know, so I think that opportunity is something that is fantastic that they have.
And one last thing, I can't resist this. What can you tell us about Made in Heaven 2?
Nothing. And Field can't say anything right now.
But you're shooting it. It's going to be
I
out
can't
this
say
year.
anything right now. I'm under contract to not say anything right now, so I can't.
We'll let you go at that, Alankrita. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to talk to you and to learn so much about the process of filmmaking as well. Thank you, and more power to you.
Thank you so much, Kaveri. It was lovely, lovely chatting with you. Thank you so much.
That was an intriguing conversation. Hope you enjoyed that session. If you want to catch the other sessions, you can log on to eventexpress.com, newindianexpress.com or edxlive.com. If you are more of a social media person, you can also join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter or YouTube. Thank you for watching. Welcome back to the New Indian Express's ThinkEdu Conclave 2021. As we step into a new normal, we talk about the lessons we need for this new world. We have a day full of intriguing and thought-provoking conversations planned for you, so sit back and enjoy. As we move towards the vision of New India, it is important to impart the right education to young India. We have BJP leader, Rajya Sabha MP and author Dr. Subramanian Swamy to discuss the role of Indian gene in education. Senior journalist Kaveri Bamzai will also be joining the conversation.
How you Mr. Swamy, all well?
Yes, going strong.
Great. So today we thought we'll talk about the Indian education system and perhaps compare it with China, because we so love to compare ourselves to China. And this is perhaps something that we really should emulate from them. But you know that better. So I'd like to put it to you that what kind of education system do we have we had so far? A lot of people tend to think that it's, produced Macaulay Putras and Macaulay Putris and pseudo-liberals, a very popular word with a lot of people. Would you agree with that?
Well, I would broadly agree with it, that this system has not changed much since Macaulay's time. And Macaulay stated his objective very clearly. He said, I want to create people who are Indian in blood and Indian in color, but in habits, they must be emulating the British. They should dress in British coat, that is suit, boot and all that. And they should speak English, not Sanskrit. And that they should adopt British morals. That also he said very clearly. I don't know what British morals are like, but anyway.
Yeah.
So then he ensured, he said that one row of a book stall is worth the entire Sanskrit literature. And many places where we know about the Mughals burning down our libraries, but the British also went systematically by. But they were a little smarter that they wrote an alternative history. The Mughals, they just burnt up things, but they didn't form an alternative history. The alternative history is not, we are not one country, we are not one people. The north is Aryan, the south is Dravidian. These are words which they have taken from our texts. And Dravidian, actually, originally, Shankaracharya, Adi Shankara was the one who created that word, means where the three oceans meet or the three coasts meet, Travid. You see, Travid became Dravid. And then the Aryan, there is no such word as Aryan. There is only a word called Arya, and Arya applies to anybody who's a cultured person. It could be northern, southern, eastern, western. Right. So he created this Dravidian movement, which said that, we originally ruled and then the Aryans came from Europe and then, they were lighter skinned. Of course, if you are living in the north in the snows, you're going to be in the lighter skin. And if you're going to be near the equator, the pigmentation will change, and pigmentation's got nothing to do with race. And that is why now the DNA studies show that we are all one Indians. There is no such thing as Northern Indian and Southern Indian. So they created this psychology, and then they wanted people who would become clerks in their governmental establishment.
Right.
And anyone who thought independently and had any ideas of freedom, he was brutally treated. Look at how Savarkar was treated. Yeah. You may not like Savarkar's view, but his fundamental problem, which with the British, was that he said he wanted India to be free. And he said that we are traditionally a Hindu country, and it says Hindu culture should be the foundation. And they made him into an extremist, they made it into a thing, and so they ruined his life and, tried to break him. So the same thing goes with others. Now, in the case of Mahatma Gandhi, of course, they, because he was so nonviolent, he didn't want an overthrow. They, put up with this, but frequently sent him to jail. Subhash Chandra Bose, they were frightened of him, and especially after he was able to collect together an army and this impact on the British Indian Army. The British had always said very clearly, as long as the army is with us, we have no problem staying in India. The day they turn against us, we have to leave because we are too small in numbers. And 1857, they had been systematically building a submissive army, but Subhash Bose had created this feeling. So I'm going back to say that what they created is somebody who's complicit, who doesn't think out of the box. And the rest of the society will pounce on anyone who thinks differently. And that happened to me when I came back from Harvard and I said socialism will not work in India. Mrs. Gandhi was the one who, was most upset. And I wasn't allowed to teach. I was sacked from IIT.
You weren't allowed to teach at Delhi School of Economics as well, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. See, I got a letter from Mr. Amartya Sen, who was the department chairman, saying that please come here. We have decided that you will head the chair for China and be a professor. When I arrived here, he disowned his letter. He says circumstances have changed. What circumstances? The Congress split and the communists joined with Congress, and they part of the coalition, ruling coalition. And now all these communists decided that they will make all the institution communists, like the JNU was made. So he said, no, I can't implement this thing. I'm sorry, I can't live by my letter. And so meantime, the IIT, which had been earlier writing to me when I was at Harvard, I told them I'm available, and they appointed me as professor. And I taught there for about 3 years. And I wrote a book called Swadeshi Plan, which irritated Mrs. Gandhi so much that in the floor of Parliament, she read out extracts of it. And of course, she named me Santa Claus. He's promising the atom bomb, he's promising self-reliance, he's promising this. But ultimately, that's what worked. And during the transition.
Yeah.
So anyway, the thing is that this illiberalism has come from that time. You see, it's not a question of something that we have acquired recently. It has been continuing. No one with a view, which is sort of is a replacement for the existing British education system, was permitted, and they were all run down as extremists, as Hindu fanatics, fascists, Hitler, and so on. And it still continues to some extent today, but it's becoming less and less. So I think when you say pseudo-liberal, it means that you're only liberal for those who think like us.
Yeah.
Anyone who doesn't think like us, you don't think that's a challenge? Let's have a debate. Let's discuss. Let's see who. This is the Hindu tradition. They're called Shastras. This Adi Shankara went all the way from South India to North India to argue, and converted all the people from Buddhism back to Hinduism. So that's our tradition of argument. And this argument, you see, was taboo. As long as it's all right, you can argue within the framework that the British put us together. We are Aryans and Dravidians. We are not one nation originally. And the British put us together. And we must be liberal. We must treat, Hinduism is not anything special compared to other religions like Islam and Christianity. And, secularism means full equality. It means, not to talk about the past. And then you become an obscurantist if you talk about the past. Yeah. So this is the format in which we have been functioning, and that's still continuing. And I regret to say BJP has not been able to bring about a cultural change, which is what we originally said we would do. We are still struggling. The educational system has the same books, same nonsense in it, same untruth in it. And unless we make these changes, these pseudo-liberals will be turned out. And this English language, which we are using it just now because of compulsion, actually makes it easier. And therefore, from the very day one, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru didn't agree. Otherwise, we could have imposed not Hindi. We could have said Sanskrit.
Right.
And like the Jews have recreated Hebrew, we could have, given a rebirth to Sanskrit. Devanagari script, which is not only Sanskrit script, but Hindi script, Marathi script, Nepali script. It's a most scientific script. And today, just one more point. Today, those who are working on artificial intelligence say that ultimately we have to start storing knowledge in the computer. And there's only one language which doesn't confuse the computer, and that's Sanskrit. And that's appeared in the Journal of Artificial Intelligence produced by NASA. You can get it in the Google. If you go to Google and type Sanskrit and artificial intelligence, it will come, or Sanskrit and NASA, you will get the citation. So in this circumstance, unless we change these basics of our education, you are going to continue to get these pseudo-liberals over. And if you fall foul of those people whom we call as liberals, pseudo-liberals, they will go after you. They will block your appointments. They will, keep you out of the media. They will, make you out to be some kind of fanatic. That's kind of thing. And now they have got allies in the abroad who are a little frightened of this unity that's emerging in India. And therefore, India would be will be entitled to be a third pole in the world after America and China.
So do you see the new, any hope in the national education policy, which the government announced last year, which in fact talks about some of these things? It talks about going back to ancient texts and it talks about experiential learning. But do you see any hope in it?
Yeah, these are all, kind of like a khichdi, see. A little bit of this, little bit of this, little bit of this. The question is, when you go to a class, what does your teacher? I've been taught by Paul Samuelson, Simon Kuznets, Vasily Leontief, all these great names. Usually, there's matchless. They're like, nine.
Wrote all our textbooks. Yeah.
Yeah. So they used to make you think. Here, whatever the teacher says, you memorize, reproduce in the exam, you'll get the marks. The room for original thinking, research was not there. Of course, I was a rebel, so I started doing research even at the age of 19, which has earned me my scholarship to Harvard. But the fact is that most people are told to pay attention in class, listen to what the teacher says, and then literally reproduce it. And the teacher will mark you down if you don't repeat what he says, even if it's right or wrong. So that system has not changed, and there is no, yes.
What needs to change?
What needs
fundamentally?
to change?
We have to.
What needs to change is two things. First, it should not be necessary to get a bachelor's degree or a master's degree to get a job, which is reasonably decent. You see the number of, I think 75% of our people go from school to college to get a bachelor's degree. In the United States, it's only 35%. In China, it's 40%, 45%. Now, that doesn't mean that China is less literate. They train people for technical things so they can get a job, they can become mechanics, so they don't have to go through get a BA. We have, even for mechanics, minimum qualification is BA. You see, so therefore, first is that those who go to higher education must be committed to research, and they may drop out, fail out. But the second is, you need to give a very decent salary to the teachers. Now, maybe in Delhi University you get a decent salary, JNU may be given even more decent salary. But in the schools, the primary schools, if you see China, you see America, and see what the difference is, much of the thinking process is developed in schools, high schools.
Yeah.
And by the time they come to college, if they go to college, they go straight into writing their own papers. In the United States, we hardly had question papers. These are take-home exams. You could look at your books. Yeah. And then the teacher used to look whether the answers have any originality. So that kind of thing is not there in this. And who are the ones who did it? The education minister doesn't have much education. I mean, he has in one very limited field, but not in the field of education. And the people they brought in are, people who have no scholarship, no research papers, who have not. So that whole same cycle goes on. It's only they have not been able to. They have not been able to revise it. We need a revised, actual, factual history book. Who we are. When Indians don't know who we are across the length and breadth of the country, how can you have a change? So this is just a lip service. And look at the allocation for education. This time they've reduced it.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
In long years ago, 1966, Kothari Commission was set up to find out what should be done for education. And they said it should be 6%. And we are not even 1.5%.
We're just about 3.5%, sir.
3-5 points, including salary, everything else.
Exactly. Yeah, all that.
In terms of school buildings, books, and libraries,
Yeah.
1.5% of it only. So, therefore, I would say that teachers, you should be able to attract teachers. You should have your folklore, which says, like we had in the ancient days, that Acharya is bigger than the king. You see?
Right.
And then make it so attractive that, he doesn't have worry about. In those days, of course, the acharyas would just stick their hand out, people would put money in their hand.
Right.
So today, we haven't reached that stage back again. So make the salary so much that the teachers never have this problem. What will happen after their retirement? In fact, jokingly, after I was sacked from the IIT, at a very young age, 28, right. And I was restored after, almost 45 years or something. And I got my back salary.
Which was what, 18 lakh or something, right?
Yeah, in lakhs. Because the 8% interest was also added.
Yeah.
And all my previous, teachers who were along with me in IIT, they told me, "Hey, we are much worse off than you. We thought your career is gone, you're doomed, you're finished after you got sacked, because we knew you wouldn't get a job anywhere in India," which I didn't.
Yeah.
But they say now you have got a lump sum, which even our retirement fee and gratuity, nothing adds up to it.
So the seeds of success are always in one's failure, I think,
Absolutely. This is another thing you have to teach our people.
Yeah.
Take risk.
Yes.
I give you an example. At Harvard, I had 40 students usually, and there are many countries, including India. So I asked to ask after the classes were over and the people are about to graduate and formally get their degrees in a convocation. At my last class, I would ask them, now that you got a Harvard degree, what kind of an employment are you going to go for?
Right.
So they said, you tell us what the alternative. I said, one alternative is that you take a job in the corporation as an officer, and every year your salary will increase 5%. And you will end up at the age of 65 to retire with all your gratuity, etc. And you buy a house and watch television for the rest of your life. But it's no risk at all. The other is like Bill Gates, he threw Harvard. Yeah. He left Harvard halfway through and became a billionaire.
Mark Zuckerberg did
yeah, that's right, exactly. Yeah. And so I said, and became billionaires.
Yeah.
So do you want a risky prosperity or you want a guaranteed poverty? Which of the two would you like?
Right.
And Americans would say, please tell us what's the probability that of risk that will fall flat on our face. But the Indians always said, no, we want that guaranteed poverty job because it is guaranteed.
Yeah.
It is poverty.
Yeah. But that's
that mindset must go.
Mindset. Yeah.
Yeah. You know why? Because economic growth is no more considered by economists. I mean, true economists, not all the hoi polloi you see in the finance ministry. True economists knows that economic growth is not only more capital, more labor, but it's also more innovation.
Right.
Locomotives, they transformed Britain into an industrial revolution. Right. The Americans been since then inventing. Now the latest being the internet, which has completely revolutionized everything.
Right.
So innovation is the key. Today in India, if we are able to convert thorium, we got 60% of the world's thorium into uranium, usable uranium. You will have what others will not have because uranium is getting exhausted by 2047.
Right.
But we are not doing it. You have shortage of water. Israel has no rivers, but every tap there has 24 hours of filtered pure water. How? Because they desalinate seawater.
Right.
And that the Arabs have also copied. So this Dubai and all these places are greenery. Entirely by desalination.
Yeah.
So why don't we do it? Why are we fighting about Kaveri? I mean, not, excuse me, nothing to do with you. Kaveri, this water. Every year we fight Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Just desalinate seawater and you will get all the water you want. So therefore, innovation is not in our blood.
Yeah.
We have to teach people, and innovation means you have to provide the system where people have a reasonable risk, padding for risk, but they must take the risk, and you can tell them these are the things we want. Hydrogen fuel cells. I've been talking about it for the last 15 years when people thought it was a mad idea, but today it's become a practical idea, but we are nowhere. You don't need to import crude oil.
Right. So there are two aspects to this. One, in the US, it was really the Defense Department which was researching for weapons, etc., which came up with actually almost every innovation that exists. And the second is the Bell Laboratories model of, people from different disciplines meeting each other, often in the canteen, as used to happen at the Bell Laboratory. And that sort of transdiscipline, interdisciplinary thinking. We have neither. Why is that?
Because
we have a very powerful military organization in a way, don't we?
No. You see, the thing is, in America, what happened is there was this Great Depression, and they didn't recover it till the mid-30s. Then this Hitler posed a threat, and they had to go to war. And so during the war, all these innovations and all started. And then after the war, in the 50s, they continued. And a lot of research grants used. The National Science Foundation was set up. We used to give grants to teachers in various universities. We are looking at this, we are looking at this, please tell us how to do it. So they went about it systematically. In our country, all our research institutions the heads are appointed by the government. And these guys generally are sycophants who haven't done any work. Many of them may claim an education qualification, but deeper look, it's all fake. They don't have that. I don't have to name names, but I can name people at very high places who don't have a degree, but have claimed to have a degree. So that bureaucratic setup has to go. You see, in the United States, most of the top universities are set up not with government money, but with alumni's money. Harvard is set up by alumni. And then Harvard, manages funds. Same thing is Brown with Chicago. With everywhere you find that universities are run by alumni. People who are grateful to the universities come back. We have no such system. Alumni can't go back to IIT because IIT is run by the government of India. At the level of board of governors appointment.
At most they can finance a chair or something. That's what they can do at the most.
At the most, and then the director has to give him freedom. I have experienced it in IIT. I wrote a joint paper with Paul Samuelson, which has become world famous. But you would not believe it. The director of IIT set up a committee to see whether it was a coded language for CIA. And he appointed a chairman of the physics department to go into my research paper. I couldn't even tell Samuelson this. I would have felt so ashamed. Nothing came out of it. But this is what they did to harass me, you see. CIA, and that he is passing secret messages to Paul Samuelson to pass it on to CIA. I mean, could you say it? And he was Mr. Dogra. Mr. Dogra's only qualification to be the director of IIT was his wife was doing ikebana or some Japanese gardening thing for Indira Gandhi. That's all. And he was appointed. He was a CPWD Mistri. You see, not Mistri, but he was that contractor that there was. From there, he became IIT director. So how do you expect? You see, there has to be some respect for, which is our ancient tradition. Jnani and Tyagi was considered the highest.
Exactly.
The king came below him. You see, that has to come. And see, the Chinese have actually adopted many of these Sanskritic principles. They give plenty of autonomy for basic research. I mean, economics and all that, they throttle you if you step out of line. But physics, Wuhan, what happened, it misfired. But they were on a very advanced research. Artificial intelligence. In artificial intelligence, the Americans are saying Sanskrit is the basis for its computer knowledge storing. But we are nowhere. The Chinese have gone very far ahead, and they can blow your electricity network. They can blow your weapons. It's S-400 that you are getting from the Russians. They can make it fizzle when the aircraft is taken off with it, you see, and there'll be a crash. So the Chinese have gone in for these innovations in a big way in the last 20 years.
Is that not a model that we can follow? After all, at one point, we were almost equal, weren't we?
No, we were ahead of them till about 2005.
Right.
After that, the decline started, and during Narendra Modi's period, the gap is widened. See, Narendra Modi is a great, architect of putting through an electorate into a tizzy and all that.
Yeah.
But look at the fact that he has systematically avoided anyone in politics who had any talent.
Yeah.
Either he retired them saying that they're too old, because now he's stuck with Mr. Sridharan in Kerala, 89 years old.
Exactly. Talk about age limit.
But there is an anti-intellectualism in our government today.
Right. Right.
And then of course all your intellectuals anyway have been their backs have been broken. They are all singing his tunes. So the academic atmosphere is necessary where we can replicate the Chinese. The Chinese are very clear. Social sciences will strangle you, but basic sciences you are free. These are things we want. You want what you want, we'll give you.
Right.
And these universities like Tsinghua and all, where Xi Jinping himself graduated from, they are given so much freedom to do what they want. And they have come up and they have all gone, all their scholarships have been paid. They've gone to America because after Great Leap, their education system had suffered, and they all come back and they are now professors with great freedom that they have. And they have now today in so many areas, they've overtaken us. Even in software, now they are overtaken us. Earlier on, we were the giants in software. Right. But then we were basically blue-collar workers. And now
we basically focused on the back office and then
that's right.
Part power. So,
absolutely.
I mean, if there were 5 things or 2, 3, 4, whatever, things that we could learn from China in investing in education, what would you say these would be? And what kind of time frame would you give us?
See, the time frame is, if the will is there, it can happen. See, people told me from for almost 1950 to 1990, we followed the Soviet economic model.
Yeah.
We never crossed 3.5% per year GDP.
Right.
And what did they say? This is the Hindu rate of growth.
Right.
I don't know whether you heard this phrase before.
Of course. This was
okay.
Pre-liberalization, this is all we used to hear.
That's right. And it actually was a communist rate of growth because we are following the 5-year plans and so on. What happened, it began with Mr. Chandrasekhar, but he lasted very little. But Mr. Narasimha Rao made a clean break.
Yeah.
And we went up to 8% in 5 years from 3.5%. And people that said at that time, please go and read the newspapers, that, Narasimha Rao is gambled and he's got people like Swamy to drive him nuts and so on. And economy will collapse. In one blow, he removed all the quotas and the licenses. And the thing boomed.
Right.
He had only one car, Fiat, and perhaps Hindustan Motors. And now we have cars. All that. The pent-up energy has been now exhausted. So we need now to build a new energy where we reduce taxes and tell people if you earn innovation, everything is tax exempt for you. In fact, I am in favor of a blanket abolition of income tax because that will enthuse people to save and that saving will be available. So we can, if you ask me, are we potentially capable? 100%. We will overtake China in no time because we are a free country. And so there's a much more greater likelihood of free exchange of ideas. But the problem is everybody's insecure that, this guy will get ahead of me, that will get ahead of me. I don't understand what he's saying. Therefore, he must be speaking gibberish. This insecurity is the bane of our society today. how do you make a person secure? You know, and the security, insecurity comes from the top right down, going down, all the down to the lane. The section officer is afraid of the chaprasi, and the and the deputy secretary is afraid of the section officer. It's, you know, this is the thing that we have to overcome by a cultural change.
Right. And that's peculiar. I've never seen you know, people higher up in the hierarchy being afraid of those lower down. It's
That's
a
right.
peculiar thing, you know.
That's
I find that very odd.
That's right. That it's not odd. It's insecurity. See, insecurity, you will always be afraid of your shadow. Although you should know that the shadow can't do anything to you, but the people are afraid. Yeah, they are afraid. This insecurity is being built in over the years of the British system, where you could lose your job if you even spoke one word against the authority. And that's been convenient. We are a democracy, not because the literate people in this country want democracy. It's the illiterate people who wanted it. See the voting in 1977. The entire educated South voted for Indira Gandhi.
Right.
It is this illiterate masses of UP, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, who voted 100% against Mrs. Gandhi, even defeated her in our own constituency, you see. So this cultural base is there, but it has to be built on, not by threats, not by danger, not by opening bank accounts. And you know, yes, if you are a person in high position and you have committed corruption, you should be prosecuted in the due process way, not by blackmail. You see, so this fear that is there has been consistently throughout the last 75 years that we have been independent, has been compounded and made more extensive than it was in the British period.
So what can we do? We can certainly invest more in education, build more universities, but it's not just building more universities, it's also the mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, if you want the long run, the long route, parents should bring up their children to be questioning.
Yes.
You know, if you go to America and a father and mother are taking their the son and daughter to Disneyland, you will find all through the walk that boy and girl are asking their parents, why this? Why he's got such big ears, Mickey Mouse? In India, if a child asks more than one or two questions, he says, shut up, otherwise I'll give you a smack, you know. We don't encourage people to question. So it has to come, it can come fast, you see, because this has been our ancient tradition. It's easy to, it's just dormant.
Yeah,
it's just dormant. You just to awaken it. You have to just awaken it. We are today a democracy still because of our ancient traditions, you see. And we are still people who, if they don't talk in the front of your face, they talk behind you at least, which they can't do in Soviet Union and other places. But we do. So we have that background tradition, which extolled dissent, and had debates. Even the conversion of Buddhism to Hinduism was done by Shankaracharya by debates. He said, if I lose the debate, I will convert to Buddhism. If you can lose the debate, you convert to Hinduism. And that's how he changed the whole country. So that's a tradition which you have to bring. Be tolerant of people's views, have respect for them. And of course, there are limits, there are reasonable restrictions to all these freedoms. But you must exude that confidence that yes, you will you'll welcome. The more you do that, then you don't have to do it for the schools, education, this thing, that thing. All will come as a part of that. It is the way of thinking without a mental block. If you read any book on emotional intelligence, what does it say? Of course, there are other intelligences like spiritual intelligence and innovational intelligence. What it says is your mind should not be blocked. When you first write a research article, never criticize yourself while you're writing it. First write it, second draft, you start the criticism. So there should be mental blocks that are there. They should be removed. And it can be, it needs propagation, and it needs propagation from the top. And conformity is something that you should not insist on, except where discipline is required, like in the army. But otherwise, conformity should not be imposed on the people. And this westernization, the idea that we must be westernized in order to be modernized, that mentality must go.
Dr. Swamy, I wanted to ask you a personal question. How did you're a product of the same system. How did you personally sort of overcome all these things? You know, after all, you went to the best institutions as well. And you could also have been a Macaulay Putra. How did you escape that trap?
I think in childhood, I was rated my parents had 5 children. And I was rated the dumbest.
Really?
Absolutely. And they all, they were used to speculate whether I'll be a chaprasi or a trainee in the Bhilai. There was a new steel plant coming up called Bhilai Steel Plant.
Yeah, of course.
Whether I'll become
of modern India, dams and steel.
That my future lay in becoming a foreman in Bhilai Steel Plant. I'm telling you, I was run down completely. But maybe my mother was secretly improving my confidence. I don't know. But I didn't do very well in school. But suddenly I was, brilliant, broke all records in college in mathematics of the least expected. And today, many of our people, my father's friends and their children, so on, whom I knew, they feel a little shamefaced when, I confront them with what they told me. I have a bad memory. So I would say the biggest thing that happened in making a serious change in my mental attitude was my training in America.
Okay.
Where these professors loved you, they promoted you. There was no running you down or making fun of you. They welcomed you making mistakes. And then correcting it. That is the Jewish tradition.
Right.
Which immigrant Jews came to America. Right. America is losing a bit of it now because it's getting polarized society. That is the thing that promotes. In my case, it is that 10 years in America at Harvard with the PhD and then teaching there, that set my mind. And then when I came back, I faced all these discrimination. But I had the mental attitude that I will not go back to America, but I'll fight it here, even if I have to give up my teaching profession. And one success led to another. In sense, it was always up and down, but the more the ball was pushed down, the more it went.
Right.
And even today, I have the same problem. I've been run down by my own party members who have been paid to tweet against me and so on. It doesn't matter, but in all, the most important thing is this has to be inculcated. It can't be born. You can't be born. Have a thick skin. Just ignore criticism. Do what you think is right. And you may ask people's advice, but ultimately you must make up the mind and blame nobody else.
Right.
Then I'm telling you, if all people's great lives, you have to read the biographies of many people.
Yeah.
Get that confidence.
Yeah. Right. So did you in your childhood look up to anyone in particular? I'm asking because a lot of students, struggle. They struggle to find their core. They struggle to find their self-confidence. Was there anyone you looked up to?
No, absolutely none. Because I was never, told about anybody because they thought I was a gone case. I mean, that's basically, as I told you.
Did you resent your father for doing that, or did you?
I had a big quarrel with him, but to his credit, 3 days before he died, he told me that he wanted to apologize to me. I said, what for?
Oh.
So he said, I've been very harsh with you. I said, that doesn't matter. It improved me. So I have to thank you. I mean, it was good of him to have. So yes, no doubt. I had problems with my father. Of course, like all Hindu mothers, my mother, anything I said was right. I can't do any wrong. She was the other extreme.
Right.
But my father,
you need that unconditional love. I think you need that to build.
Mothers are capable of that, and that's what you need. Yeah.
Right. So, to any aspiring student, any aspiring researcher, if you had that Harvard class in front of you again,
Yeah.
what would you tell them? What are the two things that they need to do?
Well, this is an attitude which has to be cultivated. It's not natural.
Right.
Not what you are taught.
Yeah.
And I've learned this from Gita.
Hmm.
Never be afraid to take risk.
Right.
Of course, talk to people and make sure that you're not taking a wild risk.
Right.
Okay. 2, never be dependent on your mood to be dependent on the result of your action.
Right.
And that's what Krishna teaches you also in the Gita.
Right.
You are only entitled to work, but the fruits of that action, I will decide.
Right.
And you will get it in which form, what, when, and all, it'll be part of your karma. And one day you will get something without doing anything. And someday you will get nothing after doing a hell of a lot.
Right.
So take that, in your stride. So I will say to everybody, and I run a class online for all these matters through the Virat Hindustan Sangam, which I created. So there, I only say this: you have freedom to act, but you have no right to expect the reward for it. You can work for a reward, and you can hope that you will get it. But if you don't get it, nothing, move on to something else.
Right.
That attitude, in my opinion, which Gita teaches us, is something that should be taught in schools also. Yeah. Here, everything is marks. I got 2 marks more than you. Oh, great celebration, you see. So that is the problem.
And so would you add self-study to it? If you don't know something, then study it. Do it yourself if you have.
I tell all my students, I've told all of them in my class, read what I'm going to teach tomorrow.
Right.
Come to class and pay attention.
Right.
That means concentration. It's a training. Then go back and review what you are taught.
Yeah.
I can tell you, you don't have to study for the exam at all.
Yeah.
I broke the record at Harvard. Nobody can pass the PhD generals within less than 3 years. I passed it in 6 months. Nobody can get a PhD without less than 4 years. And that from the toughest thesis advisor, Simon Kuznets, I got it in 1 year. And I became a member of the first Asian to become a member of the faculty at Harvard. So these are, people think, when they think of me, they think these are all shows of I have some genius. No, it is you select a target, but don't be attached to that target.
Right.
Take advice, speak to her, but go with self-confidence, do your best, knowing fully well that the only freedom you have is action.
Yeah.
The result of that action is not in your hand. If you have that, you'll be forever happy. I've never been unhappy in my life, must tell you very frankly. At no stage, it sounds very corny to say that, but I've never been unhappy in anything that happens.
Right.
Because I follow this Krishna principle.
Yeah.
Never think that the right to the fruit is yours.
Yeah.
It's Krishna's calculus that is going on.
Right.
And he'll do it on karma.
Yeah. If you had to be, would you be reborn as Dr. Swamy again?
If I've not committed any sin, I won't be reborn at all.
Right, of course. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you. And I think it's very inspiring to listen to it as well, especially for young people, I think, who at this moment in history are really facing a very uncertain future.
That's right.
And I think they really need something to hold on to, which is not really, currently there's, as you said, such a wave of anti-intellectualism sweeping the country that they tend to think that, a life of the mind doesn't matter, but it matters, doesn't it?
Absolutely, no question.
Yeah.
Freedom to think and allow the other person to think also. They say, I was never allowed to think. Whatever I said, I was, made into a fanatic, and that is spreading all over the world. That intolerance. You can disagree.
Yeah.
You may not want to keep the company of somebody else, but don't say that he can't hold these views unless it's, of course, against the country. That's but that has to be a very strict definition. It can't be a loose definition. That if you're against the Prime Minister, you must be against the country. Then, can't have that.
Thank you so much for talking to us. It's always been a pleasure. Thank you.
I know you've always been a good interviewer also.
Thank you very much. That's a great compliment coming from you, sir. Thank you.
That was an intriguing conversation. Hope you enjoyed that session. If you want to catch the other sessions, you can log on to eventexpress.com, newindianexpress.com or edxlive.com. If you are more of a social media person, you can also join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter or YouTube. Thank you for watching.